Hello everyone, I am the Weather Dude. Welcome back, and today we are going to be talking about Invest 93L, which is the latest direct tropical threat to the mainland United States. We're seeing it start to brew in the Bay of Campeche and like the southwestern region of the Gulf of Mexico. So we're gonna break it down in this video. Who could see the impacts? How severe could the impacts be? All of that will be covered in today's video. So as always, be sure to subscribe and hit that notification bell and drop a like on the video as well, so you do not miss any future content. And we're just going to go ahead and get right into the video. All right, so first off, we're going to take a look here at the National Hurricane Center, their graphical tropical outlook to see 93L. You can see it right there in the southwestern Gulf of Mexico. Showers and thunderstorms have been starting to develop. They're not very organized, but there are developing thunderstorms that we will be watching not only over the course of this video, but over the next couple of days. There also is Invest 92L out here, which was initially, I feel like it was supposed to go further north, and I feel like it's gotten pushed a little bit more west. So we'll have to watch and keep an eye on this one, because while it still could make a northward turn, we could see it track a little bit further west than expected. So we'll have to keep an eye on that one. But for this video, for the sake of this video, we will be monitoring this one over here, Invest 93L, and what kind of major impacts, or any kind of impacts that it could deliver to the Gulf Coast region and parts of the southeast. All right, so environmental conditions are marginally favorable for a short window for the storm to develop, and I'll be talking about all the factors that go for and against this system. By Wednesday morning, the system could merge with a developing frontal boundary, maybe give some additional energy and an additional Air Force reconnaissance. Aircraft is en route to investigate the system this afternoon, apparently, and will provide more information. So we'll see if we can get some updates for them as they come in. But taking a look here, again, 30% chance right now of development within the next 48 hours and 7 days, but if it's going to develop, it's going to be within like the next 24 to 48 hours because it only has that short window in the Gulf here, and then maybe one more chance once it gets across the southeast. Okay. So let's take a look here at the current. You can see like on the current storms tab on Tropical Tidbits, you can see 25 knots as the maximum sustained wind with the storm system right now, pressure at about 1,005 millibars. And as you can see on the satellite, it doesn't look all that impressive. Most of the shower and thunderstorm activity that is there is well off to the north and east of the storm system. The low center is somewhere in here. You can see like the disturbance center in there. All right, again, not much happening. It's getting sheared a little bit, and that's kind of because we have like these. I'll explain the steering factors later, but there is a upper level high pressure that's kind of driving these winds, right? So it's kind of pushing, those upper level winds are pushing thunderstorms away from that low center currently. And that's why it looks pretty disorganized at the moment. So again, you can see that low location, the low center right here, about 94.5 degrees west and about 22 degrees north of your coordinates. We take a look at the model track guidance. You can see there is a pretty good agreement that about 2 days from now, it will be somewhere near, like, for example, Apalachicola, Florida. This is a good point. So Apalachicola is about right here, right? Not too far away, of course, from a place like, so like Apalachicola, and then also New Orleans and Mobile, Alabama are not too far away from this track here. Mexico City, a place that's been certainly impacted by many hurricanes in the past, including Michael, is also in the path of the system, right? So just some locations there that might sound familiar to you. The GEFS model tracks actually bring it in a little bit further west and with some decent strength, below 1,000 millibars, or just shy of hitting that 1,000 millibar mark with many of these models here. The greens indicate pressures between 1,000 and 1,005 millibars, which is a decent strength low. I mean, it's not that strong. I feel like the yellows is where it starts to get interesting, right? Below 1,000 millibars, you see triple digits, you're like, wow, this is like really a low pressure system, and that's what that entails there. But there will be strengthening of some sort, it looks like. The models here agree on. There will be some strengthening within the next 24 to 48 hours. All right, GEPS model tracks, not that many, but the ones that are available, again, do take it north and kind of just bend it east. Like it just goes like a straight line to the east here. And again, I'll explain why in just a little bit during the video why that will most likely occur. If we take a look at the intensity guidance, again, a lot of models agree it'll hit a tropical storm strength for a bit, and then probably come back down once it gets over land, and then they kind of toy around with the strength after that because there is some uncertainty as to what could happen after it gets off the southeast coast. All right, if we take a look at take a look at the sea surface temperatures, you can see where the low is sitting right now, 87-degree waters. So this is one of the factors that I say we can check off with the system, right? waters are pretty warm in this region and probably will be for a majority of its lifespan. Right? If we follow it north, right, you can see once the low moves north, maybe 86, right, mid 80s now, 84-degree waters here. Pretty much once it gets closer to the Gulf Coast, wherever it ends up going, whether that be around Louisiana or maybe the Big Bend of Florida, wherever it goes, the waters once you get closer to the coast are in the upper 70s to very low 80s. Now, I wouldn't say that doesn't weaken a storm, right? Because I mean, still, it's around 80. But I would think that doesn't like result in any strengthening by any means. Right? And if the other factors like wind shear and dry air are high, then these cooler waters are just going to be another punch in the stomach. However, I do think, or the at least what's being told right now is that the wind shear is a little bit, it's kind of moderate, but the dry air is pretty low, which is certainly good for the storm system. Not much in the Saharan air layer there. If we take a look at the tropical intensity index, you can see highly favorable for where the storm is right now. But of course, as it moves to the north, conditions will get slightly less favorable and probably limited development will probably be the case here if this were to develop. But still, that does not mean we will not have major impacts such as rain and wind. All right, so we take a look at the vorticity signature. You can see there 850 millibar heights. You can see we have some pretty moderate energy, right? Sitting there in the Bay of Campeche, and of course this will continue to, this energy will probably only escalate over time over the next couple of days here. We take a look at the oceanic heat content. You can see there's a decent amount, right? You might recognize some of these from my when I used to do the hurricane season tracking videos, right? Of course, these were definitely things to always look out for, and I still use them here because they're still very important no matter what storm you're talking about. There is still that hotspot, that famous hotspot I always like to point out in the central Gulf of Mexico. If the storm moves over that, if it takes a right turn a little sooner, moves over that little hotspot, the little dot in the middle there, it might have a little bit more of a chance. But wherever it goes, marginally favorable conditions will most likely be the environment that it will have to go through here. So here's where we talked about the steering. This is exactly what I was talking about here. As you can see, we got an upper level low here. Of course, this is also just the remnants of Philippe, just kind of hanging back here across southeastern Canada, right? Because we had it move through New England, and now it's in just sitting around in Canada, just spiraling there. Then we have an upper level high pressure system here, and essentially the wind is just getting funneled in between these two. Right, coming from this way, right, we got the low pulling the winds down from Canada west to east, and then we got the high pulling the winds up here from west to east coming from the Pacific side. So if you got a flight that's maybe, I don't know, traveling through the middle here, kind of traveling through the eastern United States, you're probably going to have some strong tailwind to help assist your flight, right? Make the flights go a little faster. Of course, it's, these winds wouldn't be great if they were at the surface when you're trying to land, but that's besides the point. But there is some tailwind, and of course, that could also still lead to some turbulence because it's still very high wind, nonetheless. Kind of like this is kind of similar to the situation when we had that high pressure off to the north here, and when we had our low pressure system Ophelia off to the south, and it was just funneling the wind in between in the East Coast, and for weeks it's just battering the oceans and coastal flooding. Well, that's kind of like what this is, except this time it's happening at the upper levels, and that's going to help to just squeeze the storm right in between here and go through the southeast and end up most likely off of the southeast coast. So if we take a look here at the wind shear currently, again, where we have the low and the high setting up in between, of course, there's going to be a funneling of wind, and of course that leads to some high shear, which is currently dominating the Gulf of Mexico. We'll see if this maybe will lessen, but as of right now, it looks like it's still holding on pretty strong. I mean, the low is like pretty much sitting right here, so it doesn't have too far to go where it starts entering that high shear zone. So if development were to occur, in my opinion right now, I think because of these high shear values, I think it would most likely be subtropical. Then again, we said that with Ophelia, and yet here we are, we're still tropical. So it does appear over at least the south central part that shear has been decreasing slightly over the past 24 hours, but only by about 5 knots, and even then it's still, again, pretty high, even across the southern part of the Gulf of Mexico. Which this is one of the things that I would say is against the storm system, right? We had the check mark that was for the sea surface temperatures. Those were good. Wind shear is kind of bad. And those are kind of your main factors. Dry air is also very low, so that would be a good factor, a factor in favor of the storm system. All right, now we're going to head to the tail end here of the video, the model segment. We're going to we're going to show off a few models here. Starting with the global ones, we have the GFS model. You can see on the bottom left of your screen, the storm coming up from the southwest. Some sort of low pressure does develop. The storm doesn't seem to know where its own low pressure center is, right? It's trying to find it. And eventually it does cross through the southeast as we head to tomorrow and Thursday. Early Thursday, it's off the southeast coast. We see like a little bit of a low center there. And again, just like I was telling you, it's going to bolt pretty much due east once it gets off of the southeast coast here. So the good news is, because of we have that low to the north, that high to the south, kind of helping to funnel the storm in between. That helps because it gets the storm out of here sooner, right? Which means we won't be dealing with that flooding rains for as long, right? And there's also more shear created, so the storm is weaker. However, the storm is going to be moving still at a pretty good clip, and that means it will have a lot of momentum and energy with it. So we still could see some wind impacts for the amount of time that the storm is actually present, but it will lessen the strength and it will lessen the amount of rain that you get, which is of course good news. And parts of the southeast and the Gulf Coast are actually in a drought, so this rain is actually welcome, but we know too much of a good thing is not a good thing anymore. Most likely about 1 to 2 inches. I feel like some areas, according to the GFS model, right, like on the coasts of the Carolinas and Georgia, or South Carolina and Georgia, excuse me, and then maybe around Apalachicola could exceed 2 inches, but in general about 1 inch or 2 is expected on the GFS solution. If we look at the European model, right, you can see again, pretty much because it's within like the next 24 to 48 hours, thank God the models actually agree on something, there's pretty much no room to disagree because it's in such a short window. But you can see there is a heavy batch of rain that will most likely be near the storm center, and that kind of has me believing that maybe the shear could start like toning down a little bit. Because usually if the wind shear was high and was blowing in this direction, all the rain would be to the east of the center, which is kind of like what's happening right now. But this could signify that shear could maybe start to dwindle at least a little bit. But you can see a lot of isobars, kind of your low center in there, heavy patches of rain. Of course, don't forget about the wind. Winds could exceed 30 miles an hour, maybe even gusts going over 35 to 40. And of course, it's going to be blowing the water onshore, right? The low develops off here, and then we just got the persistent onshore flow for places like the Carolinas. All right, so then that's going to move off to the east, and then deepening in strength, so it could cause some prolonged rip currents and high waves, but the storm will be moving away, and of course that is good news. European model, a little bit more bullish in the solutions, right? 1 to 2 inches kind of extends pretty far inland into to South Carolina, Georgia, not shy of Atlanta there on that half inch, the 3/4 inch line of rain. Southeast Alabama, but of course we have that 2 to 4 inch zone, which goes from say like Hilton Head Island down to Savannah, Georgia, off to Apalachicola, Mobile, Alabama, right? And kind of like in that 2 to 4 inch heavier rain zone. So the Europeans just kind of have more of a rain impact here. If we take a look at the Canadian model, right, you can see if we take a look here, the storm is moving off from the south and west, kind of makes that right hand turn, and then moves into Florida off the southeast coast, and then kind of just sits there and dwindles. And then we have that other cross-country storm that moves through around the time on Sunday. So they forecast on the Canadian a little heavier band of rain in Alabama, Georgia for 2 to 4 inches, maybe across north central Florida as well. But in general, around 1 inch or so, maybe around 1 to 1.5 inches of rain. Again, I feel like that 1 to 2 inches of rain is enough to not flood a place out, but it's enough to relieve the drought that parts of the southeast are seeing at the moment. And before we get into the HWRF model here, I do want to say I did actually just look at the aircraft reconnaissance, and they are flying around the INVEST, not really picking up any significant data. They kind of arrived in the storm recently, so I will certainly be providing updates on what they find, because I'm sure there'll be more missions that go out over the next day or so into what they find in future missions, because they're still flying around the storm. They pretty much entered recently, at least at the time I'm recording this video, they kind of recently entered. So we'll see what they pick up there. But so far, they haven't picked up any major wind. They're kind of hovering around the center. So we'll see if they fly into those more strong thunderstorms of what could happen there. But getting back to this here, the HWRF model, you can see pressure could deepen, maybe even getting below 1,000 millibars, maybe even, dare I say, below 994 millibars of pressure. Heavy rain near the center, moving into the Gulf side, of course, of Florida on the panhandle. And then southeast Alabama, southern Georgia, South Carolina, you can see just facing an onslaught of heavy rain here, according to the HWRF solution. So facing a lot of heavy rain, the low moves over Georgia, briefly jumps over to 1,000 millibars of pressure and then deepens again as it moves off the coast. We'll zoom out here and look at the parent model so you can kind of see, same model, it's just a parent version, meaning it's more zoomed out. You can kind of see where those rainfall totals are, 2 to 4 inches. And again, just like what the Canadian was saying, that heavier band that extends into Alabama and Georgia. But again, in this general zone, 2 to 4 inches of rain, which is still very heavy rain. Right? And some major impacts here. Of course, the wind and the waves will also be felt with this storm system because, again, but the rain will be the primary threat because, again, tropical moisture will be feeding in from the Gulf and the Caribbean here, helping to, of course, enhance these rainfall totals. Last model here, we're going to take a look at the NAM model, the 12 km, and you can see low moves off, gets dragged off to the east. Once it kind of hits land, it kind of gets dragged more of a due east direction. Low sits off the coast, and you can see here, again, that heavy band of rain that seems to be setting up here across Alabama and Georgia, kind of like in the south central parts of each state there. And you can see moving through South Carolina and then offshore and then kind of just dwindling. And then we look at the rainfall totals here, a little bit more bullish. Again, you can see that band in Alabama and Georgia, but even outside of that, still 2 to 4 inches. A lot of models seem to agree on like that 2-3 inch mark for a lot of places in the southeast, pretty much from between New Orleans and Charleston, South Carolina, and then points south could receive. As far south as, say, Ocala, Florida, could even see some heavier bouts of rain, maybe even Orlando as well, could receive some heavy rain from this storm system. So that's it for today's video. Thank you guys so much for watching. So again, just a little recap. Low pressure sitting in the Bay of Campeche, southwestern Gulf of Mexico, making its way to the north and eventually making more of a northeast and easterly turn. Again, between like eastern Louisiana and South Carolina. So of course, we got states like Mississippi, Alabama, Georgia, Florida as well. That could be impacted by several inches of rain, as high as 2 to 4 inches in some spots, maybe even higher than that locally in heavier thunderstorms. Of course, the rain is going to be a concern. We got the winds gusting over 30-35 miles an hour, potentially as a low gain strength, dropping below 1,000 millibars or so. And then, of course, due to that wind, we're going to be seeing the higher risk of rip currents and waves over the next couple and even few days. Because once the low moves offshore, it's going to be continuing to strengthen and therefore kind of expanding its wind energy outward. So we could still see some rip current impacts for in the coming days. But that is it for today's video. Thank you guys so much for watching. Stay tuned for updates. I'm the Weather Dude signing off till next time, and I will catch you guys in the next video.